I went to an event on Friday, January 30th in Washington, D.C. by the MAHA Institute. And the title was Reclaiming Science, the People's NIH, with NIH Director Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. I'm probably butchering that, but he is the director of the NIH. And I was very interested to see where science is going in the future and right now, what topics they were going to cover. Just to preface this, I do not believe that we should look at the government for health. That is the new Nora, the denormalized Nora. The old Nora did follow the government guidelines for health. But since I've awoken since 2020, I look inwards for help, for health. And for guidance, I look for other like-minded people for advice. But I do work in healthcare, and a lot of my patients follow any government guidelines. And I am very excited for the MAHA Institute and how they are looking at more root cause and not really looking more towards Western medicine. So back in August, I was invited to the fertility roundtable, and it was very illuminating. They were looking at the root cause of the fertility struggles throughout the American population, and they did not focus on drugs or IVF or vaccines. And so I was really hopeful going into the Reclaiming the Science with the NIH, the National Institute of Health. So I took a bunch of notes and I just wanted to go over them with you. I was impressed a lot with Dr. Bhattacharya, his opening remarks. He said that we need to reclaim science based on the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Government cannot and should not push any mandates of any kind on us. We need to use the NIH to address the health problems of the United States, which I'm thrilled that MAHA is finally addressing. Hey, we have a huge problem with chronic disease in the American population, and we're getting worse. We're not getting better, despite the US spends the most on healthcare, and yet we have the poorest health. So he did say we need to use science to improve the health and longevity of people, which is what it's supposed to do. The COVID pandemic was used to treat others as biohazards, which I was very shocked. He came right off. I mean, this was 2 minutes into this session, and his opening remarks were talking about how COVID was totally mishandled and how we turned against each other. COVID was used to turn our neighbors against each other. And I mean, I can bear witness to that. I discussed a lot of natural health during COVID, and all of my neighbors blocked me on social media because I wouldn't give in to the fear. And yeah, treating others as biohazards. So, when you were walking around your neighborhood, you were supposed to keep a 6-foot distance. You treated others as they were the enemy. It's mind-blowing what we went through. So the government closing businesses and dictating what you can and can't do led to the massive distrust of doctors, of the NIH, of anyone in the health space. He did say that life expectancy has been flat since 2010. So that was very curious to hear that we haven't improved life expectancy despite all of our insurance premiums rising, which does mean that we are getting sicker. That's a whole kerfluffle right now at one of my practices. Our health insurance premiums are going up. Insurance is going up, and yet we are not getting any better. And that's why insurance is rising. And our life expectancy isn't getting better despite spending all of this money on healthcare. Chronic disease crisis is at an all-time high, which is why MAHA was invented or created, Make America Healthy Again. He said it was a cry for help from the American people. And that's why Secretary Kennedy is now in the position he is. He's leading this, asking questions. What's going on with our health? How can we improve it? For the first time, MAHA is about prevention. How can people make informed decisions if the peer-reviewed data isn't reliable? So many people say that science is bought and paid for. I agree, because I see it daily with these drug reps. They're coming in and they are bringing these expensive lunches for these doctors, and doctors are prescribing the drugs that are pushed by the drug reps who spends the money. And it's those same drug companies that are probably, or they are funding this data. We need to change to replication as the basis of truth. So all of these studies, are they being replicated, and is it factual? Make science be willing to take big intellectual risks again. So going against the norm and asking the hard questions. Science takes time. Use science for advancing health. Use it to make the lives of every single person better. And that's huge. Have we been focusing on advancing health instead of just pill pushing, which is what I see every day in cardiology? We're just pushing pills and we're not pushing lifestyle. And this was funny. So I don't watch the news, but I do see a lot of the headlines. And so much when Secretary Kennedy came in, the media went berserk and was saying that all of this funding was being cut for pediatric cancer research, and just saying how they were cutting all of these, making all these funding cuts. So he said, Dr. Bhattacharya said, there hasn't been funding cuts. There's been a shift to make science work for the people. So the money is being allocated to where it needs to go. 1 in 4 Americans don't believe that the NIH has their best interest in mind. That's definitely me. And that was most of the people in the room. We need to achieve results that moves the needle of health forward. And he went back to discuss COVID-19 being the mechanism of social control and how it was all about control. Guys, that was huge hearing, because I have been touted as some conspiracy theorist for this past almost 6 years. Guys, it's been almost 6 years. In 2 months, no, I'm sorry, a month and a half, it will officially have been 6 years since I scanned my first COVID positive. And 2 weeks in, I noticed this was control. We were being told what to do and none of it made sense. And we have this guy, the NIH director, admitting that to a room full of hundreds of people, including the media. I mean, I sat next to someone who was from the press. Granted, he was not on the right side of the press, but regardless, there was press, and this guy is saying, yeah, COVID-19 was all about control. This was one big social experiment. One thing I did not know was Fauci was not the head of NIH. He was just one small subset of the 27 portions of the NIH. For some reason, I thought he was this big and control guy, and he definitely wasn't. $50 billion a year is allocated for the National Institute of Health. What the NIH should be is it should support research to improve health and longevity of people. We need to make sure the science we are funding are problems the people actually have. So focusing on cancer and heart disease and diabetes and autoimmune diseases, why are these people having these problems? Why aren't we looking at the root cause? That's what I'm thinking, at least. And I believe that's where they were going. They want to start actually listening to the patients and then take that to the lab to do more trials. This was awesome to hear. The NIH participated very heavily in the dietary guidelines. They wanted to make sure that they were founded in science. So this was not just some woo-woo that Secretary Kennedy pulled out. He had this huge board of people that he was listening to. And these people came from Democrats, Republicans. They were from all sides. Politics aside, the new dietary guidelines was founded in science. Peer-reviewed, actual factual science. We need to remove the politicization of science and put people's health first. Health should not be politicized whatsoever. This is not a right or a left. We should just want to make people healthier and happier, because usually healthier equals happier. And a lot of people are not happy. The direction of the leadership of the NIH has not been changing over the years, which creates a scientific aristocracy. So the same people are reviewing these new problems brought to them, and they're not new ideas. We need new ideas. So now they are refreshing science with new ideas. Will they produce ideas that help? And they are taking these intellectual risks. And then enters the vaccine talk. And this is where they lost me. I was excited. He was gaining so much momentum. And then the vaccine talk came in. And they had just revamped the childhood vaccine schedule, which was spectacular news. I don't think that any vaccines are good. That's my personal belief. I don't believe that you can inject health through heavy metals, aluminum, aborted fetal cells. Why do we need that in our body? That does not equal health to me. However, do your own research and make an informed decision for you and your family. But now they're talking about an Alzheimer's vaccine that reduces the disease by 20 to 30%. Now, a lot of people in the health space have been talking about Alzheimer's being type 3 diabetes, a metabolic disease that is leading to our brains not performing properly. So why aren't we addressing that root cause instead of creating a new shot that's going to make drug companies even more money? Big Pharma does not need to be any larger than it already is. So that was very upsetting to hear about. Peer-reviewed is an innovative idea. They are expanding the reviewer panels instead of using the same people. The old NIH had to be an established reviewer. That's gone with the new NIH. This I loved. And, it was back and forth, back and forth. I heard some things that illuminated me, and then they would take 10 steps backwards. So adopting food is medicine, increasing nutrition research, especially in cancer research. So I keep hearing about the ketogenic diet, being able to kill cancer cells, being in a high level of ketosis will kill these cancer cells, and you can actually get rid of cancer, go into remission with a ketogenic diet. So I am praying so hard that they will do that research and release it. And this admin will release it. They won't just push it to the side because this isn't going to make Big Pharma any more money. Because usually going on a healthy diet, a whole foods diet, is going to take away from Big Pharma. Funding cuts are not being recorded properly. So there's another media play. They spent more on fiscal year 2025 than any year previously. So they are definitely not cutting funding to the NIH and to all of these research companies. Science is not being cut. All money was spent on science. They talked about the fetal cells being used for science. Apparently, they've been getting away from that for over a decade. They are now using your own stem cells and transforming them for science. So that's definitely a lot better than the aborted fetal cells. None of these changes are politically motivated. And this is what Dr. Bhattacharya said. None of these changes are politically motivated. If a future political leader wants to reverse them, God help them. They are taking big risks with ideas and translating them to better health for the American people. So all of this was about moving forward in a better way, improving things, not being stagnant anymore, asking the questions, asking the hard questions. So then we get on to cancer. This was frustrating. Cancer and chronic diseases. Cancer is the second leading cause of death. Why? There are currently 20 million cancer survivors. Goal moving forward is to restore faith in the NCI, National Cancer Institute. Somehow cancer is down 30% since the 90s. I need to dig into that more because as a cardiac sonographer, I personally am not seeing cancer going down. I am seeing cancer exploding, especially since 2021 when the COVID shots were released. Breast cancer is at an all-time high, especially people younger than me. Why are people in their 30s having breast cancer? I don't recall that being such a problem before. How to prevent, okay, and then he did say how to prevent cancer in the first place. He mentioned diet and lifestyle. That's huge. Put focus on prevention and screening. Best cancer is the one you never get. Bring screening to people who don't have access. And then there's so many rabbit holes you can go down with the screening process. Mammograms. Is finding cancer early necessarily a good thing? Why is cancer there in the first place? That's been a huge talk with Weston A. Price lately. Is cancer really the problem, or is it the fixer? That's been interesting. So mammograms, what do? They are smushing the breast. What if you have a small amount of cancer? What are you doing when you're smushing that breast? I don't know. That's just where my brain is going. That's been a hot topic lately. Should you get mammograms? Should you get colonoscopies? Are they causing more harm than good? That's a great conversation to have, and one that I need to dive into even more. I had multiple colonoscopies in my early teen years. Why would a 13-year-old have a colonoscopy? That is a horrible thing. But of course, my diet and my lifestyle was absolutely horrendous. And having my gallbladder out at age 11 definitely should have never been done. But the root cause was diet. So let's address the diet instead. This was fascinating. What proportions of cancer are preventable? Guys, he said that around half of cancer is preventable. He said not genetic, not bad luck. It's preventable for half of us. That was mind-blowing. Very pro-testing, pro-screening, said that it will save money in the long run because if you're catching it earlier, then you won't need as much treatment. So they were addressing all of the woo-woo stuff as well. This was fun, and I was not happy with what they said. Ivermectin has been tested, not a cure-all for cancer. Just completed a trial that will be released in a few months. Praying hard that it actually shows the opposite of what he was saying. They said that ivermectin is not a strong signal for humans. He said that in non-vertebrates, ivermectin was great for cancer, but in vertebrates, it wasn't. Not something I've gone down. Thankfully, I haven't been diagnosed with cancer, so I haven't been going down all of the rabbit holes that I should be yet. He said you can't discredit one person that has success with it, but they need to look at the next 100 people. They are running the clinical trials. So that's huge. At least they're running the clinical trials with all of this conspiracy theorist talk about ivermectin. They are very open to any and all new ideas when it comes to helping cancer. They are not motivated by preserving profit for big corporations, only interested in finding a cure for cancer. And then they went back another 10 spots with mRNA vaccines for cancer curing. Once again, how can injecting mRNA be a good thing? We saw it was a disaster in 2021 through now. I just had a patient on Thursday, 70 years old, and they were so scared to talk to me. He got endocarditis, a bacterial infection on his aortic valve, following his 4th COVID shot. So he got his shot, and within 24 hours, he had a dangerously high fever. He was hospitalized for this fever, and they couldn't find out what was happening, what was going on. For some insane reason, he did not have an echo for a month and a half while he was hospitalized. That should have been one of the first questions. Is this affecting his heart? Turns out he had a massive growth on his aortic valve, and he had to have his aortic valve replaced. This 70-year-old and his wife both said, Nora, I know we may sound crazy, but we believe this was the COVID shot that did this. And I was like, yep, most likely. And they were flabbergasted that I even agreed with them. They said every doctor said they were absolutely out of their mind, and there's no way that these COVID vaccines would cause any harm. And I said, I can't tell you how many hundreds of patients I've heard that had side effects from these COVID vaccines after they got them. There's a range of vaccine injuries that I've heard about. And it makes sense if your body is fighting against whatever this foreign object that was just injected into you. So you're going to spike a fever. And now they want to use this mRNA therapy for cancer when I've heard about mRNA causing cancer. No. They did say that the data is lacking between mRNA causing cancer. They said that these mRNA vaccines do cause inflammation. So why are we wanting to move forward with even trying this out for any other metabolic diseases or cancer? The mRNA will cause the inflammation, which shows that the cancer more that was already there, but made apparent after the shot. So they're saying that the cancer was already there, and then the mRNA vaccine is just bringing it forward in your body. How is this an okay thing? I can't wrap my head around that. They're saying it can reduce relapse with cancer, vaccines, the vaccines that is, and wants to accelerate human testing. Hello 2020 all over again. Why aren't alternative treatments suggested? The director is looking into this. Studies haven't been done in a controlled fashion yet, and the goal is to not exclude ideas anymore. So they are actually traveling the world searching for natural products that will help with cancer. And then he ended it with this. The real intervention for any cancer is to eat real food. I need to create a shirt for that. Eat real food. Because at the basis of all health is eating real whole foods, nothing processed. And then we get into the NIAID new leadership. And this was a very fascinating talk. They were very against COVID. They were very against the way everything was handled. And I lit up during this, and I will be including the video. It was an 8-minute video that I took, and I will be putting it at the end of this. So they are funding research on diseases affecting people now, not focusing on the future, but trying to address the chronic disease epidemic, what's going on right now. Viruses, if you believe in them, are predictably unpredictable. Imagine that, because COVID affected people in a different manner across the board. One person had this symptom, one person had this symptom. He did say we are going to have the worst flu season. It's expected this year to be the worst. Why is that? I'm asking that question. Why? Why didn't he ask this question? And I'm sure he is, but let's discuss that. Why are we still pushing the pneumonia shot, the COVID boosters? I mean, we're on what, like 11 or 12 of the COVID booster, plus a flu shot. How many heavy metals are we injecting into our body, and how much is our bodies rejecting those heavy metals, and how sick are we getting post-shot? He did ask, what can we do now to improve public health? 85% of people died from a seasonal flu, not the pandemic flu. They discussed the gain of function. The executive order released in May, there's 7 principles. That is something I need to research. I did take some notes on this that need to look that up later. What did that say? But they are currently ending all gain of function research. They need to focus on people preparedness instead of pandemic preparedness. I loved this. Eat better, live better, which will lead to better responses to the viruses released. He said that, viruses released. So our bodies can respond better when we get the sunlight, when we move our bodies, and when we eat whole foods. Loved it. The origin of COVID is not fully understood. We don't have any definitive data. During COVID, NIAID was at war with the White House. And that's what Fauci was the director of. NIAID was at war with the White House. They wanted Trump to lose so that the control and the mandates could continue. The goal of the NIH is to make you healthier. It doesn't matter what party you are. It should be nonpartisan. The NIH should not tell people what to do. They are there to create the scientific data and then to pass that on to leaders. So Fauci should not have been telling people what to do. Dr. Matthew Mimoli, he was my hero on this panel. So Dr. Matthew Mimoli is an expert in respiratory viruses. He has been with the NIH for 2 decades. And yet when COVID appeared, Fauci refused to discuss the methods of dealing with COVID, which is a respiratory virus. He refused to discuss this with Dr. Mimoli. He wanted nothing to do with him, despite him being an expert on respiratory illnesses. Why wouldn't you want to confer with the best of the best? So Dr. Matt Mimoli started raising questions about ethics dealing with the mandates. Guys, he is currently the principal deputy director of the NIH, and he did not get the COVID vaccine. He wouldn't. He refused to, and so did his wife. If that doesn't speak volumes, I don't know what does. I can't wrap my head around that, and that is in the video that I took. They did go on to discuss the 1918 bird flu virus and how every virus is a descendant from that 1918 flu strand. The flu going around now shares similar properties, not a manipulated virus. And then he said, so what was not invented in 1918? The refrigerator, so cold food was not all around. Cars were just starting to be introduced. So food spoilage, poor hygiene, our roads were covered in horse feces. Sanitation wasn't a thing. So yes, we were getting sick from the poor living conditions. And he said that the reason you survived the 1918 flu was because you had someone to take care of you. You were fed, you were warm, and you were clean. So you lived well and you survived. Oh, and then they started talking about HIV, and I walked out because that's just another rabbit hole I've already gone down, and I didn't want to hear about any more vaccines. I was very impressed with a lot of what they said. I am not happy that they are pushing forward with new vaccines when that's regressing, in my opinion. We need to be focusing on the real whole foods, finding root causes. Why is there an epidemic of type 1 diabetes now? That has a correlation to it being a vaccine injury as well. Why aren't we focused on these autoimmune conditions? Why aren't we focused on the fertility epidemic? Why can't these women get pregnant? Hello, one of them. Why aren't we asking all of these questions about root causes instead of injecting more toxins? The eat real food, flipping the food pyramid is huge, and knowing that the NIH had their hands in that this whole time and that all of this is science-based. We need to be eating the protein. We need to be eating saturated fats for hormones. I am praying that people will start listening. However, one side is refusing to accept any of these ideas despite it being for better health. And I'm hoping that more doctors will stop pushing the old childhood vaccine schedule. I am praying that these kids can be healthy going forward. I am praying that pediatric cancer will start to go down because that has been on the rise. I am just hoping for overall better health for America. I have been seeing it. This is my 16th year as a cardiac sonographer, and my patients have been getting larger and larger. My shoulders are throbbing. My carpal tunnel is terrible. I have to eat a meat-based, protein-first nearly carnivore diet so that my wrists don't throb after doing my job because these patients are so large. It is not abnormal for me to have a day full of patients that are 250 pounds or more. And this is a huge problem. So I am praying hard for a lot of these changes to be made and that we will be healthier and happier going forward. And I am just thrilled that we have these people in power that are finally asking the hard questions and have our best interest in mind. And it's not money driven for once, because that is what I have woken up to with healthcare. It's all about big pharma. It's all about pushing pills and making that money, because a patient cured is a patient lost. And we need to focus on curing people instead of just placing a Band-Aid on. So please watch the next 8-minute video I'm adding. And I hope you got some good information out of this. If you have any questions, reach out to me, ask them in the comments. But yeah, I can't wait for my next MAHA Institute Roundtable. There's some more events that are going to be going on this year. It is just February 1st. And I did hear about some lineups going on, especially with Moms Across America. They are doing some phenomenal things. So anyways, that is it for today.
NIH was an act of courage. Again, I recognize it as an act of courage because you weren't allowed to contradict the leader for fear that you were going to get suppressed. One of the first things I made sure to do as an NIH director is to tell everyone in the internal program that I want an academic freedom policy where people are free to publish their science however they like, even if I disagree with it, that's fine. That's how science works. In 2022, 2023, he forced a debate about the vaccine mandates at the NIH. It was an act of tremendous courage on his part to do that. And somehow he didn't lose his job. I still have to figure out how that happened. But
I want to ask you about that. What was that like? Because this all came out. I mean, I didn't see it at the time. It came out later when you were it was obvious that I think the first story was in the Wall. It was obvious. I'm like, okay, they rushed this out. They have their narrative together. They were coming after you over the vaccine mandates, and it became a little bit more extreme. You hit Stat News, which is basically the pharmaceutical industry funding its own news. What was it like when being inside and saying, yeah, I don't think mandates are a big deal? I mean, explain to me. I mean, I worked in the Senate. I would go home at night sometimes. They were not fun nights.
Yeah. So being a respiratory virus researcher and infectious disease physician, and by the time the pandemic came along, I'd been around a while, and I had learned a lot about respiratory viruses and pandemics, from this gentleman sitting next to me, who is, I consider, the world's expert on actual pandemic respiratory viruses. I watched what was happening. So when things started, I was engaged, Jeff and I were both engaged in trying to offer help and suggestion and thinking about what was going on. And we quickly were marginalized. And I watched the decisions that were being made and the things that were happening in shock.
Well,
I couldn't understand.
You're saying I was being marginalized. You got to explain to people who aren't from DC, how does that work internally inside the drugs?
Well, so in other words, no one was interested in my opinion about anything.
So you realize you weren't on the emails anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't involved. No one was interested.
More specifically, the research questions that we wanted to ask to jump in to help with the pandemic response, to understand these questions, to think of new ways to deal with it, were adopted, not funded.
In the intramural program, there are very few respiratory virus experts. We are two of those. We were at the time. We're two of those people. And so, not to be brought to the table to discuss a respiratory virus pandemic that's happening was kind of shocking and really surprising, to be honest. And so, I watched the decisions that were being made, and I just couldn't believe it. And as time went on, I couldn't believe it more and more and more, and was very upset by everything that was going on with the lockdowns and everything else. Finally, when the mandates started to become become a possibility. So this was around July of whatever year, 2021. This is insane, and I knew I wasn't getting vaccinated, and I'm still not, and my wife wasn't, and my kids weren't. I looked at the strategy of the vaccine, and knowing what I knew about these RNA viruses, I was like, this is never going to work. It's not a sound strategy for this kind of virus. So at that point, I said, I've waited long enough, and I finally wrote to Dr. Fauci and his deputy and Dr. Lane and explained my concern. Not trying to toot my own horn, but if you read the email I sent, everything I said actually ended up coming true. It's shocking how accurate it was. And so I wrote this email explaining to them that I thought the mandates were a bad idea. I offered assistance, I offered help. I explained what I thought the consequences of the mandates would be. And then, as I said, that really wasn't, I got an email from Dr. Lane that said thank you, and that was it. And so then I went to our ethics department, and I asked them if anyone had talked to them about the bioethics of the vaccine mandate. And they said no. I said, well, they're about to initiate a mandate on the entire country, and no one's talked to you about whether it's bioethical or not. And they said no. And I said, well, don't you think it might be something we should discuss? I said, well, we'll take it back and discuss. So they went back and discussed, and they came to me and they said, yeah, we think it's an important topic. We'd like to do this in an ethics grand round. So I said, terrific. I said, this is great. And they said, but it's going to be in November. And I said, well, why can't we do it sooner? So the mandates went into place, everything happened, and then we did eventually have this thing in November. Now, Wall Street Journal did the story on me a little bit earlier than that. And it was interesting in that I think I was in a unique position in that I was a successful intramural scientist who was a respiratory virus, known for respiratory virus work. And I had been on TV talking about it in the past. Dr. Fauci had gotten on TV because of my work in the past. I have awards, director's awards from Tony Fauci. I have awards from MAHA NIH. So I think they felt that they didn't want to turn me into some sort of martyr for speaking up. So they kind of left me alone, to be honest, which is how I kept my job, Jay. They left me alone. I couldn't go out and go on TV or anything like that, but they left me alone, and I kind of kept moving forward. And then we eventually had this ethics discussion. I was hoping there were going to be a set of bioethicists there to debate whether these mandates were ethical. That's not actually what happened. What ended up happening was they put me up first to make my argument, and then they had a researcher from the VRC describe why the vaccine was great, and then they had a lawyer come on and explain why it was legal to have these mandates, which was not my question. My question was, is it ethical? So I've never actually had that ethics debate that I wanted. Maybe we'll do it.
Oh yeah, we're definitely having
it was absolutely the toughest couple of years of my life during the pandemic. Feeling like I was going crazy because of everything that was being done.
One of the downside tragedies of all this that we've learned since we've been in this spot is that I was joking with Jeff. The word administer means in Latin to help serve. And we're trying to actually reinstill that our job is to serve the American public, not to become famous, not to get lots of publications, etc. And what got lost in all this was all the good work of NIAID staff that had nothing to do with any of this, right? So we're trying to bring those people to the fore now. And what we found since we've been there are all these folks who have great ideas that really weren't able to bring those forth before. And so that's one of the things we're trying to do now is to actually enable people to come in and say, hey, it's amazing. It's almost daily, right? We